Alright, hey, what's up? So to the 5 of you who have been watching my devlogs, firstly, thank you. Secondly, you might remember a boss that I did a while back called the Serpent. Yeah, well, compared to the Guardian construct that I did like 2 weeks ago, it was kinda lame when I went back to it, and that's why it's getting a fresh new rework. Kinda. But before we actually get to that, let's go back to the Serpent and find out what are the flaws. Alright, first of all, it's not flashy at all. Granted, these are gonna be early game bosses, so they don't need to be very exciting, but the Serpent has nearly no effects, so it's kinda lame. Coupled with the fact that it doesn't have any projectiles, there's not a lot of places to put effects. So one of the first goals of the successor to the Serpent is to have some more flashy attacks. Now I'm not trying to blind the screen with post-processing, I'm just trying to add some unique little stuff to the boss fight. Alright, secondly, the Serpent was very one-dimensional. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you go back to the Serpent, its 2 main attacks address it moving towards you, which is kinda lame. Granted, they do make you move around a lot, so that kinda makes it fun, but still, it just feels like those attacks don't really fit into a boss fight. Now I want this new boss to still be very fast paced like the Serpent, but I wanted to approach you in more interesting ways. Alright, and the last thing I want to improve about the Serpent is, well, the design. It's kinda lame. So what's the solution? Just make the design cooler. Now unfortunately, I'm talentless. Kinda like you. So I just got somebody else to do the design for me instead. Alright, and now to show the brand new boss. This is Nachtlicht. Nachtlicht is German for nightlight, which fits because of its very bright blue accents in a very dark biome. Alright, that's enough about that, let's get to the actual fight. So if you remember, I did like the part of the Serpent where the attacks are quite fast paced, I just didn't like how boring they were. Well, Nachtlicht has basically what is the Serpent's charge attack. The difference being it will first dive down and snip your f***ing power supply and turn off all your lights. Now, after diving off the screen, there will be a slight delay before a spark appears. That spark indicates the direction at which Nachtlicht is coming from. One of the problems with the Serpent's charge attack, other than it being boring, is that it doesn't telegraph where it's going, so it's kinda hard to tell. This basically fixes that problem. Now there is one more little gimmick to this attack, but it's not important for phase 1, so I'm gonna skip it for now. The second attack is a pretty simple one, but it is something that the Serpent from before severely lacked. Projectiles. In phase 1 there's a really basic attack where it just shoots out some projectiles straight forward. That's it, real simple. Now the tricky part of this attack comes from the telegraph. You might have noticed that Nachtlicht had this blue energy that was travelling up his body before it shot out the projectiles. Now you might go, oh hey, it's doing that telegraph. And since we know the charge from before doesn't have a telegraph like that, the next attack must be the projectiles. Well, you would be exactly wrong. In this next attack, it has the exact same telegraph as the projectiles, but instead of shooting at you, it will dive down instead. So if you were avoiding the projectiles and going around the boss, and you end up below it, you're f***ed. Well, it's not that bad, it's just a small hit, but point is you have to be really careful and either be really on point with your reactions or keep track of what attacks have already been done, since they cannot be repeated until the next cycle. Anyways, yeah, back to this attack. A short while after Nachtlicht leaves the screen, you'll see Nachtlicht's eyes spark somewhere near you, before it shoots projectiles at you. Now, all 3 attacks so far have been relatively simple, but it's still more interesting than the Serpent's attacks. It's not too difficult because it's in the early game, and it's also quite interesting since the boss has its own gimmicks with light. Alright, let's move on to phase 2. Before I move on to the next phase, you might notice that some parts of Nachtlicht are breaking off throughout the fight. Well, that's another unique thing about Nachtlicht. You can break off his armor as you go, and those exposed parts will take significantly more damage. You will really need to take advantage of this because Nachtlicht is very tanky, so always try to hit as many exposed sections as possible. But yeah, let's get back to Nachtlicht. In phase 2, the armor on Nachtlicht's head will fall off. That is where it can get the most damage, but it is also the part of Nachtlicht that deals the most damage, so be careful with that. Now the reason the hit is the most vulnerable part is because of risk and reward. If you are intentionally taking the risk to attack Nachtlicht's head, you should get rewarded for that. Granted, this isn't a ginormous reward, it's just a damage boost, but the biggest thing about hitting Nachtlicht's head comes in its charge attack. If you remember Nachtlicht's charge attack from phase 1, I said there was another gimmick to it. Well, that gimmick is, if you hit Nachtlicht while it's charging, on the head, it will stop it. Completely. The reason I'm only mentioning it now is because in phase 2, Nachtlicht will not only charge at you once, it will do it 3 times. This gives you 2 choices. You can either just wait for the attack to end, but risk more chances of getting hit, or instead you could risk potentially taking one big hit to stop the attack entirely. This will be even more useful in phase 3 because it will start shooting projectiles at you and it will charge 5 times. But we'll get to that later. Nachtlicht's projectile attack from before will now also spawn a tracking projectile. It lasts for a pretty long time and is very slightly faster than you, so you're gonna have to keep it in mind. As for the third attack, Nachtlicht will now shoot at you 3 times before stopping, and on the final shot, instead of the normal projectiles, it will spawn that ball instead. Pretty simple. Now on to phase 3. In phase 3, Nutclick will shed all of its armor and become extremely aggressive. And by that I mean that it doesn't have any cooldown between its attacks anymore. It will just keep going until one of you dies. Since Nutclick has shed all of its armor during this phase, it becomes very squishy, so try to end the fight as fast as you can. Alright, congrats, you beat Nutclick, so what do you get? Well, Nutclick's boss item is the Voltic Fin. The Voltic Fin is a passive item that allows you to shoot projectiles if you get hurt. On the surface that might sound kinda weak, but trust me, it can be pretty powerful if you have the right synergies. I'll link the item overview for the Voltic Fin in the description, so do go check it out. And one more thing, I just made a Discord, so if you want to share any ideas or any feedback, feel free to join, I'll have the link in the description as well. That's it, that's about it for this devlog. Thank you so much for watching and yeah, bye.